Darius Quell was 34 years old, and until the night of his own engagement party, he believed he was the luckiest man in the room. He had built everything from nothing: a paid-off house in Atlanta worth over $400,000, a career, and a woman he loved completely. He had worked double shifts for 18 months to buy Priya's ring. That night, surrounded by family and the people they loved, he stepped onto the venue terrace for a breath of air and heard his fiancée's voice through a half-open door. She was speaking to her best friend. She didn't know he was listening. She said, "I'm finally going to be rich, Becca. He has no idea what he's sitting on." Darius stood motionless while the music played and the champagne flowed 30 feet away. The woman who cried at his toast. The woman who said she loved him. She had researched his assets before she ever said yes. What Darius did next, quietly, methodically, without a single raised voice, she never saw coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The venue was called the Linwood. It sat on the east side of Atlanta, tucked between a row of renovated buildings that had once been warehouses and were now the kind of places people rented for weddings and product launches. String lights ran along the ceiling beams, round tables with white linen. A bar cart near the back wall, staffed by a young man who poured with both hands. The food was real, not the tiny decorative bites that left you hungry, but actual trays of things that filled a plate. Darius Quell had picked the venue himself. He had driven past it twice before booking it, walking the space with the same quiet attention he brought to every structural decision at work. Good bones, right proportions, nothing trying too hard. That was the standard he held for most things. He stood near the far end of the room now, a glass of sparkling water in his hand, watching the party move around him the way a river moves around a stone. Conversations crossed and broke apart. Someone laughed too loud near the bar. Two of Priya's co-workers from the marketing firm were taking a photo near the floral display, angling their chins up just slightly, the way people do when they know what they're doing. Darius noticed all of it. He usually did. He was not the kind of man who announced himself when he walked into a room. At 6 feet even, he carried himself with a stillness that people sometimes mistook for shyness. He was not shy. He was precise. There was a difference. Shy meant you were afraid of what people thought. Precise meant you had already decided that most of what people said wasn't worth a response until you had heard all of it. He had learned that early. Memphis had been a good teacher. His mother used to say, "The loudest person in the room is usually the most scared." She said it without meanness, just as a fact, the way she stated most facts, quietly and only once, because she didn't believe in repeating herself. She was gone now, had been for 11 years. But Darius heard her voice in his head on a regular basis, especially in rooms like this one, where everyone was performing some version of themselves. He was not performing tonight. He was just present, watching, proud. Priya was across the room. She was always easy to find, not because she was loud, but because people arranged themselves around her without realizing they were doing it. She had that quality. Magnetic was the word people used, but Darius thought that was too simple. Magnets were passive. Priya was active in her warmth. She gave people her full attention when she spoke to them, tilting her body toward them slightly, asking the exact right follow-up question, laughing at the right moment and not a second before. It was a skill. He had always admired it. He watched her now. Deep green dress, hair pinned up on one side, and felt the specific satisfaction of a man who had chosen well. That was what it felt like. A settled, earned thing. He thought about the ring. 4 months of savings. He had looked at cheaper options. He had not bought one. He had not planned to fall in love with her. That was the honest truth. They had met at a rooftop party. a mutual friend, a crowded summer evening, the city laid out below them in amber and orange. She had been standing near the railing, not performing for anyone, just looking out. He had walked over mostly because the view was better from that side. She had looked at him and said, "You're the first person who's come over here who hasn't immediately said something about the view." He had said, "I was going to. I just wanted to actually see it first." She had smiled. Not the dazzling, full-performance smile. A smaller one. Real, he thought. He had thought it for a long time after. The thing that sealed it, though. The thing that moved her from someone he was falling for to the person he was going to build his life with, happened 8 months later. His Aunt Constance's 4th of July cookout. A backyard in Decatur. Plastic folding tables, the kind of heat that makes the air feel thick. Constance was not an easy woman to sit with if she didn't like you. She had spent 30 years as a paralegal and had developed an instinct for people that bordered on unsettling. Darius had watched from across the yard as Priya pulled a chair close to Constance and stayed there for 2 full hours. Not out of obligation. She was leaning in, asking questions, laughing at the answers. When Constance stood to refill her plate, Priya stood too and took the plate from her hands without being asked. Constance had caught Darius's eye over Priya's shoulder. She had given him a single, small nod. That was all he needed. Now he set his glass on a passing tray and moved toward the terrace. The room was warm from bodies, and the summer night pressed clean and cooler through the door at the far end. He needed a minute of quiet. He always needed a minute of quiet in the middle of things. The terrace was a narrow strip of concrete with a low iron railing, overlooking a small courtyard below. The door was glass, and it was half open, held there by a rubber wedge someone had kicked into place to let the air move through. He stepped outside. He heard Priya's voice before he saw her. She was below, just around the corner of the building, in the shadow of the courtyard where the string lights didn't reach. She was not alone. Becca's laugh came first, low and conspiratorial, the laugh of someone sharing something private. Then Becca's voice. "So, how does it feel? Future Mrs. Quell." Darius went still. Priya's response came a half-second later. The voice was different. Not the warm, calibrated voice from inside. Drier, flatter. Something underneath the surface, finally breaking through. "It feels like I'm finally going to be rich, Becca." "That's exactly how it feels." A beat. Becca. "You sure he's worth that much?" Priya. "He has no idea what he's sitting on. The property alone." From inside, a voice called Becca's name. Bright and oblivious, cutting through. The sound of heels on stone. Movement. Gone. Darius stood on the terrace. The string lights glowed through the glass behind him. The sounds of the party. Glasses touching. Someone's laughter rising above the rest. The low current of music, pressed against him from the other side. He did not move for a very long time. Then he went back inside. He found the center of the room. He picked up a fresh glass. He waited for the right moment, and when it came, he tapped the glass twice and smiled. The room quieted. He spoke about love, about what it meant to find someone who made you want to be better and more and steadier than you already were. He was specific, a detail from their second date, something she had said about her grandmother that he had never forgotten. He was warm. He was unhurried. He looked at Priya while he spoke, and his voice did not shake once. By the end, Priya's eyes were full. The tears moved down slowly, real-looking, specific. Her hand was pressed to her chest. The room made the sound rooms make when they believe something completely. Darius raised his glass. He filed the tears too. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago. Darius had not touched it since. It sat on the kitchen table in front of him, a dark circle inside a white mug. And he looked at it sometimes the way you look at something you meant to do and forgot about. The legal pad beside it had 3 lines written at the top and then nothing. He had stopped writing when he realized he didn't need to write it down. It was already organized in his head. It had been organizing itself all night, while he lay on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling and listened to the quiet. He had not slept. The house was early morning still. Light came through the kitchen window in a long, flat stripe across the floor. Pale, not warm yet. Outside, a car moved slowly down the street and was gone. He looked at the legal pad. He picked up the pen. He wrote, "What do I actually own?" The house first, because the house was the clearest thing. He had bought it 5 years ago for $340,000, a modest brick bungalow in a neighborhood that was just beginning to shift, the kind of neighborhood real estate agents described carefully, because the truth of it was better than it used to be, and they didn't want to say that plainly. He had put down 30%. Then he had paid extra every single month, methodically, the way his mother had taught him to approach anything that mattered. 18 months ago, he had made the final payment. He owned it outright. No mortgage, no lien, nothing attached to it but his name. The county assessor's current estimate, $410,000. The actual market value, given 2 comparable sales on his street last spring, was probably closer to $430,000. He wrote that down. Then he wrote the 401k, maxed every year since he was 27, the year he started at the firm. He had never skipped a contribution, not even the year the car died, and he was eating rice and canned salmon for 3 weeks. The balance now was just over $190,000. Then the brokerage account. He had opened it before he met Priya. Before he met anyone serious, really, back when he was 30, and had started to see clearly that the money he saved inside a company retirement account wasn't the only kind of money worth building. He had opened it quietly, funded it gradually, and never mentioned it to anyone except his financial advisor. Not because he was hiding it. He simply did not discuss money the way some people discussed money. He never had. Current balance, $218,000. He did not write that number down. He held it in his head instead, where it had always lived. He set the pen down and sat back. He thought about the question she had asked him. 8 months into the relationship, they had been at his kitchen table, this same table, and she had been looking through a home magazine she'd brought over, and she had looked up and said, casually, "What's your investment stuff like? Do you have a financial advisor, or do you just do the 401k thing?" He had deflected. Not suspiciously. He had simply said he kept it pretty simple, that he had a guy he checked in with a couple times a year. He changed the subject to something she had said earlier, and she had followed easily, laughing. What he remembered now was what happened after that. She never asked again. Not once. In the months that followed, months of shared dinners and weekend trips and long conversations about the future, she had never circled back. Not casually, not directly. The subject simply disappeared. He had noticed it at the time, filed it as, "She's not materialistic. That's a good sign." He had felt warmly about it. He understood now why someone stops asking. It is because they have already found another way to find out. He pulled his laptop over and opened the shared bills account, the one they had set up 6 months ago, practical and organized, a clean column of utilities and subscriptions, and the catering deposit for the wedding. He went through every transaction. Nothing alarming, everything reasonable. She had been contributing her half on schedule, clean on the surface. He closed the laptop. He sat with it. He picked up his phone. Floyd answered on the second ring, voice still carrying the rough edge of someone recently awake, though it was almost 7 in the morning. "You good?" "I need your brother-in-law's number," Darius said. "Walt?" A pause. Not a long one. "Give me 20 minutes. That was all Floyd said. "No, what happened? No, is everything okay?" No, are you sure? Just the 20 minutes, stated like a fact, like it was already done. Darius set the phone down on the table. He stood and walked into the living room. The engagement photo was on the mantel. Priya had framed it herself and placed it there 2 weekends ago while he was at the hardware store. He had come home to find it already up, and she had been in the kitchen making dinner, and the whole thing had felt easy and good and settled. He looked at it now. Her face, his face, both of them smiling. He was not angry yet. That was what he noticed, standing there in the quiet morning light of a house he had built and paid for and owned completely. He was not angry yet. He was thinking. The diner was on Moreland Avenue, the kind of place that had been there since before the neighborhood changed and had no intention of changing with it. Vinyl booths the color of dried mustard, a laminated menu with photographs, coffee that came without asking. Walt Briggs was already in a corner booth when Darius arrived. He was a compact man, somewhere in his mid-50s, with the kind of face that gave nothing away. Not unfriendly, just neutral, the way a wall is neutral. He had a folder in front of him and a half-eaten piece of toast, and he did not stand up when Darius sat down. He just looked at him steadily and said, "Do you want to know everything? Or do you want to know enough to make a decision?" Darius settled into the seat across from him. "Everything." Walt nodded once, like that was the answer he expected. He opened the folder. He talked the way Darius liked people to talk. Plainly, in order, without decoration. 3 months ago, someone pulled Darius's property records. Specifically, the deed, the paid-off mortgage documentation, and the full assessed value history going back 7 years. The request had gone through a real estate attorney, a woman with a small office in Buckhead, whose name Darius did not recognize. The request was legal. Public records. Anyone could pull them. But not everyone does, and not everyone thinks to request the mortgage satisfaction document alongside the deed. Whoever pulled them knew what they were looking for. Walt slid a single printed page across the table, a records request log, time-stamped. Darius looked at the date. 3 months ago. He had proposed 2 months ago. He did not say anything for a moment. He looked at the page. He thought about the ring, which had cost him 4 months of savings. He thought about her face when he got down on one knee, the way her hand had gone to her mouth, the way her eyes had filled. He set the page down. What else? Walt told him about Gordon Ashby without any particular emotion, the way you describe weather. Ashby was a residential contractor out of Charlotte, mid-40s. At the time Priya was with him, he was projecting significant success. A development deal that looked, from the outside, like it was about to make him wealthy. It collapsed. A financing arrangement fell apart. A partner pulled out, and the whole thing unwound fast and ugly. Ashby went from appearing wealthy to visibly not, inside of about 8 months. Priya had left before the full collapse became public, but not long before. 6 months later, she was in Atlanta. 8 months after that, she was at a rooftop party in Inman Park, where a mutual friend introduced her to a quiet structural engineer who didn't talk much about his money but owned his home outright and had never missed a retirement contribution in his adult life. Darius thought about that party. He remembered it clearly. The way she had found him in a corner and talked to him like he was the only person on the roof worth talking to. He had thought it was instinct. He had thought it was chemistry. He looked at Walt. "Is that everything?" Walt closed the folder. "That's what I have right now. I can keep going if you want." "Keep going," Darius said. He left $40 on the table and walked out into the gray morning air. He sat in his car for a few minutes. Then he called Aunt Constance. She picked up on the second ring and said his name the way she always said it, like it meant something, like it had weight. He told her. Not all of it, but enough. The records pull, the timeline. Ashby. Constance was quiet the whole time he spoke. That was unusual for her. When he finished, she stayed quiet for another moment. And then she said, "I never trusted that woman. Not one day. You never said anything. You were happy." A pause. "I'm not going to put a hole in my nephew's happiness on a feeling, but it was always a feeling." He asked her what she meant. "She doesn't look at you like someone she loves, Darius. She looks at you like something she wants. There's a difference. I've known that difference my whole life, and I know it when I see it." He didn't argue. He didn't say anything for a while. Constance's voice came back, quieter. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," he said. "I'm still thinking." "Then keep thinking," she said, "and don't let her know you are." Dinner that evening was pasta. Priya had made it from scratch, the kind of detail she was good at. Fresh herbs from the pot on the windowsill, the good olive oil, candles she lit without making a thing of it. She talked about the honeymoon, Amalfi Coast, maybe, or Portugal. She had been looking at a small hotel in Lisbon she thought he would love, terraced and quiet, with a view. He listened. He smiled at the right moments. Then he said, gently, framed as care, "I've been thinking we should be totally transparent going into this. Financially. I'll show you everything. I want you to feel secure." He watched her eyes. She smiled. She said, of course, that sounded healthy, that she loved that he thought about them that way. She said she'd pull her accounts together. She touched his hand. She did not say a single specific number. He noticed. He let it pass. He asked about the hotel in Lisbon and watched her brighten and talk. "She's good," he thought, "but she doesn't know I'm playing." The report was waiting in his email at 5:47 in the morning. Darius was already up. He had slept in pieces, 2 hours here, 90 minutes there, and given up somewhere around 5. He made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table in the dark with his laptop open and read. Walt had sent a PDF, 31 pages, clean formatting, no commentary, just facts laid in rows the way facts should be. Darius read it twice. The debt came first. Priya Whitmore carried $74,000 in outstanding personal debt. Walt had broken it down by source, organized and precise. 4 credit cards, 3 of them with balances that had been climbing steadily for the past 2 years. The minimum payments barely keeping up with the interest. Combined balance just over $29,000. A personal loan from a regional lender, originated 18 months ago. Balance remaining, just under $27,000. The loan had been used, based on the application's stated purpose, to consolidate earlier debt, which meant the $29,000 on the cards wasn't the beginning of the problem. It was what survived the consolidation. And then the third item, a private arrangement. Informal on its face, but Walt had found it. A notarized document filed through a small civil attorney's office in Decatur. A personal loan from one Becca Strand to Priya Whitmore. Amount? $18,000. Date? 18 months ago, nearly to the day. Interest rate? 0. No stated repayment schedule. No stated repayment trigger. Just a condition. 3 words where the specifics should have been, per mutual agreement. Darius read those 3 words 3 times. He set his coffee down. He stared at them. Per mutual agreement. That wasn't a loan document. That was a contract with something written in invisible ink. He kept reading. The Gordon Ashby section was thorough. Walt had pulled records, cross-referenced dates, and built a clean chronology that left nothing to interpretation. Priya and Ashby had been together for 14 months. During that time, Ashby's development project had generated significant local press. A mixed-use build in a Charlotte suburb. The kind of thing that, if it worked, would have been worth real money. Priya had been present in the coverage twice. A charity event photograph. A groundbreaking ceremony photo where she stood slightly behind and to the right of Ashby, smiling the exact right amount. The project collapsed in the spring. By summer, Ashby was liquidating personal assets. By fall, Priya was in Atlanta. The timing was not subtle. But it wasn't supposed to be subtle to someone reading a report. It was supposed to be invisible to someone sitting across a dinner table, watching her light candles and talk about hotels in Lisbon. Darius sat with that for a moment. He was not a man who looked wealthy. He drove a 6-year-old truck. He wore plain clothes. He didn't talk about money at parties. He had never once, in Priya's presence, mentioned the number in his brokerage account. But he owned his home outright. And 3 months before he proposed, someone had pulled the records that proved it. She had not found him by accident. She had found exactly what she was looking for. Not flash, not performance, but the quiet, documented kind of stable. The kind you had to look for specifically. The kind that didn't announce itself. He thought about the rooftop party in Inman Park. The way she had singled him out. He had thought it was instinct. He had thought it was chemistry. He closed the laptop. He called Floyd from the driveway before he drove to work. Floyd listened without interrupting, which was not natural for him, and meant he was taking it seriously. When Darius finished, there was a short silence. "The Becca loan," Floyd said. "That condition? Yeah. You need to know what she's getting out of it." "I know. So let me take her to lunch." Floyd said it the way he said most things, like it was obvious, like it had already been decided. "I'll tell her I want to get to know Priya's people. She won't think twice." Darius thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Keep it casual. Don't push. Just listen." "Dee, come on." Floyd sounded almost offended. "You know how I do." He did know. Floyd had a gift for it. The easy laugh, the meandering conversation, the way he could make a person feel like the most relaxed they'd ever been, right up until they'd said something they hadn't meant to say. He had watched Floyd do it at work, at family functions, at the poker table. It was one of the most useful things about him, and Floyd knew it and weaponized it cheerfully. "Set it up," Darius said. "Done." That evening Priya made stir-fry. She played music from her phone, something soft and wordless. She talked about a co-worker who was driving her crazy, a birthday dinner she wanted to plan, a rug she had seen online that she thought would look perfect in the living room. He listened. He nodded. He asked one question about the rug, the color, and she brightened and described it in detail, and he listened to that too. She reached over and squeezed his hand before he went to bed. He said goodnight. He smiled. He did not sleep for a long time. The restaurant was a casual Italian place in Midtown, the kind with checkered paper on the tables and a lunch special written on a chalkboard. Floyd had picked it deliberately. Nothing too nice. Nothing that said, "This is a meeting." Everything that said this is just two people who both care about somebody. He was already seated when Becca arrived. She was put together in the way Darius had described, sharp underneath the ease of her, moving through the room like she owned the air in it. She smiled when she spotted Floyd, and the smile was warm and practiced in equal measure. Floyd stood up and waved like he'd been waiting on a friend. "Becca! Hey! Hey! I was starting to think you forgot about me." She laughed. "I'm 3 minutes late. I've been here 10. I'm already on my second breadstick." He gestured at the basket. "Please, help me stop." She sat down. She was relaxed. That was the point. Floyd talked for most of the first 20 minutes. He talked about the Falcons, specifically at length about a game from 3 weeks ago that had no business going the way it did. He talked about a coworker who had microwaved fish in the break room twice in 1 week. He talked about a parking ticket he was still mad about. Becca laughed in the right places. She was good at being present, he noticed. She asked a follow-up question about the coworker. She gave her opinion on the parking ticket, which was that he should fight it, which he agreed with enthusiastically. He ordered the fettuccine Alfredo. The server looked at him for a beat. "We don't have that." "What? It's an Italian place?" "It's a Tuscan place." "Is that different?" Becca laughed. A real one, the kind that caught her off guard. Floyd grinned and ordered the first thing the server pointed to without looking at it properly. Becca ordered the arugula salad and a sparkling water. He let the conversation breathe for a while after that. Let her get comfortable. Let the laughing settle into something easy. Then, somewhere between the bread and the food arriving, Floyd leaned back in his chair and let his voice drop into something more genuine sounding. Not serious. Just sincere. I'll be honest with you, Becca. And this is just me. This is not Darius. He doesn't even know I'm saying this. I just want to make sure, you know. Like Darius is my brother. Not by blood, but in every way that counts. And he's a private dude. He doesn't talk about his business, but he's got a lot going on, a lot to offer, and He shrugged. I want to make sure Priya's got her stuff together too, you know? Like, that they're on the same level, that she's solid. He kept his voice light, kept the shrug in it. Just a loyal friend rambling. Becca looked at him for a moment. Something moved behind her eyes. A small calculation, quick and tidy. Then she smiled. You don't have to worry about that, she said. Priya knows exactly what she's doing. Not. Priya's doing great. Not. She's in a good place. Not anything soft or vague the way reassurance sounds. Priya knows exactly what she's doing. Floyd smiled and said, Good, good. That's all I needed to hear, honestly, and moved on to asking about the wedding venue, and Becca talked about it comfortably for the rest of lunch. But he had heard it, the precision of it, the wrong word in the wrong place, landing like a footstep in an empty building. He called Darius from the parking lot. She's in on it, Floyd said, no preamble. Whatever it is, Becca is in on it. Darius was quiet for a moment. What did she say? I asked if Priya had her finances together. She said, exact words, Priya knows exactly what she's doing. Another silence. Yeah, Darius said. That's not what somebody says when they're vouching for a friend, Dee. That's what somebody says when they're confirming a plan. I know. Okay. Floyd let that sit. What do you need from me? Right now? Nothing. Go home. The family dinner that evening was at Aunt Constance's house. Her idea, her cooking, her table. It had been planned 2 weeks prior, before any of this, back when dinner at Constance's was just dinner at Constance's. Priya had a work obligation. She had kissed Darius on the cheek and told him to give her love to everyone. He had said he would. He drove there alone. Constance made smothered chicken. Terry brought rolls from the bakery on Cascade. They ate and talked, and it was, for a few hours, almost exactly what it looked like. After dinner, while Constance was packaging leftovers and Floyd was doing what Floyd always did, standing near the food, technically helping but mostly grazing, Terry touched Darius's arm. Can I talk to you for a second? He followed her out to the back porch. The neighborhood was quiet. A dog was barking somewhere down the street, far enough away to be just a sound. Terry stood with her arms crossed, not from coldness but from the posture of someone holding something they didn't know how to put down. A few weeks ago, she started, then stopped, started again. I was at your place. Priya didn't know I was still there. I'd come to drop off that casserole dish I'd borrowed, and you weren't home yet, and she said come in and wait. And I was in the kitchen, and she stepped out to take a phone call. Darius looked at her. I wasn't trying to listen, Terry said, but the house is quiet, and she didn't go far enough away. And I heard her say, she paused, and he could see she was being careful, making sure she got it right. Once it's done, I'll liquidate what I can, and we'll figure the rest out. The dog down the street stopped barking. I didn't know what it meant then, Terry said. I thought maybe it was something for work, but I kept thinking about it. And now, you did right, Darius said. His voice was even. Telling me. I should have said something sooner. You're saying it now. She looked at him, the way she had looked at him when they were kids, and something was wrong and she didn't know how to fix it. How are you doing this, Darius? How are you just walking around, going to dinners, acting like everything's normal? He looked out at the dark backyard. Constance's rose bushes were just shapes in the low light. "Because I'm not done yet," he said. He drove home an hour later. He pulled into his driveway and turned off the engine and sat there. The house was dark except for the bedroom light upstairs, a warm yellow rectangle against the night. Priya was already asleep. He sat in the parked truck for a long time, hands loose in his lap, looking at the house he had bought with 7 years of careful work. The house she had researched before she ever called him hers. After a while, he got out. He went inside. He moved quietly through the dark and did not turn on any lights. Patricia O'Sea's office was on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown, clean and orderly in a way that felt earned rather than decorated. No clutter, no soft music, just a desk, 2 chairs across from it, and a woman who looked at you like she was already 3 steps ahead of whatever you were about to say. She was 60-something, small, with reading glasses she took on and off as she talked. Aunt Constance had called her the night before. By the time Darius arrived at 8:30 the next morning, Patricia already had a notepad open. "Constance tells me you have a situation," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Tell me." He told her everything. He did it the same way he did everything, in order, without drama, with specific details where details mattered. The party, what he heard, Walt's report, the property records pull, the debt, Becca's loan, Terry's kitchen. The deed clause Priya's attorney had tried to bury. He set Walt's report on her desk, along with the annotated summary Patricia's paralegal had already begun cross-referencing based on what Constance shared the night before. Patricia listened without interrupting. She took notes in a small, tight hand. When he finished, she looked at her notepad for a moment, then looked at him. "You want to get out clean," she said. It wasn't a question. "I want her to get nothing that's mine," Darius said, "and I want it documented." She nodded slowly. "First thing we do is a prenuptial agreement. You propose it to her. Frame it gently. Mutual protection. Both of you going in with your eyes open. Don't make it adversarial. Let it feel like a conversation. And if she agrees, then we watch what she does next," Patricia said. "Because how someone responds to a prenup tells you more about them than the prenup itself ever will." Darius brought it up on a Thursday evening. They were on the couch, Priya's feet folded under her, a cooking show on the television with the sound low. He kept his voice warm, easy. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the prenup thing. I know it's not romantic, and I want you to know it's not about trust. It's just about both of us going in protected. You have your career. I have the house. It makes sense to document things before we combine them." Priya looked at him for a beat, just one. Then she smiled, the full, open one. "I think that's really mature," she said. "I'm glad you brought it up. I was actually thinking about it too. Too quickly. Too easy." He'd expected at least a little resistance, even performed resistance, something that looked like emotion working through itself. There was none. "We can have our attorneys handle it," he said. "Keep it simple." "Absolutely," she said, and turned back toward the television and reached over and laced her fingers through his. He left his hand where it was. He kept his face where it was. The 10 days that followed were instructive. Priya didn't fight the prenup. She redirected around it. The asks came in gently, spaced out, framed in the language of togetherness. First, it was the deed. "I was talking to a friend who said that co-ownership before the wedding actually protects both of us. Like, it builds equity together from the start, instead of starting the clock at the ceremony. Doesn't that make more sense?" She said it over breakfast, light and practical, like she was sharing something she'd just read. Then it was the investment account. "I've been thinking about how we're going to build wealth as a unit. Shouldn't we have something that's ours from the beginning? A joint account we're both contributing to?" Each time Darius listened, he nodded in the right places. He said, That makes sense. Let me run it by Patricia so we get it structured right. And each time, nothing moved. Patricia called him on a Tuesday. Her voice, always measured, had something underneath it he hadn't heard before. Not alarm. Something closer to controlled distaste. Her attorney submitted supplemental paperwork, Patricia said. Proposed amendments attached to the prenup framework. I need you to come in. He was in her office the next morning. She had the documents laid flat on the desk. She'd gone through them with a fine-tooth comb. He could see the margin annotations in red, precise and dense. She walked him through it methodically. The language in the standard sections was boilerplate, clean, nothing remarkable. It was page 9 that changed things, a single clause, buried in a subsection about spousal financial rights. It established that in the event of irreconcilable financial disagreement, either party, if listed as a co-owner of shared property prior to marriage, retained independent liquidation rights regardless of marital status at the time of the disagreement. Patricia let him finish reading. Then she took off her glasses and set them on the desk beside the papers. "Son," she said, "this isn't a prenup." She looked at him directly. "This is an acquisition document." He drove home in silence. The city moved past the windows the way it always did, busy and indifferent. Priya had made dinner. He could smell it from the front door. Something with garlic. Something warm. The dining room table was set with candles, 2 low flames cutting against the dark of the evening. She brought the food out as he set down his keys, and she was already talking, easy and affectionate, telling him about her day. Something funny her co-worker had said. She sat down across from him. She reached across the table and took his hand in both of hers and looked at him with those warm, specific eyes. "I love you," she said. "I can't wait to build our life." He looked at her. He kept his face exactly where it needed to be. He thought about the clause on page 9. He thought about how long it took to write something like that. How many conversations? How many decisions? He thought about how good she was at this. And he decided, quietly and completely, that it was the last performance she would ever give, at his expense. He squeezed her hand once. He said, "Me too." That night, after she was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. He began to build his response. He was up before 5. The legal pad had 7 pages of notes by the time the sun came up. Clean lines, numbered. Each item connected to the next, the way load-bearing structures connect. Nothing decorative, nothing wasted. He called Patricia at 7:15. She picked up on the second ring. "I need 3 documents prepared," he said. "Sealed until I say otherwise." "Tell me what you need." He walked through it. First, a formal revocation of every pending deed amendment request. Anything Priya's attorney had submitted. Anything in draft. Anything that touched his property. Killed completely. Second, a new prenuptial agreement. Ironclad. Written by Patricia's hand alone, with no room for supplemental clauses or buried provisions. His assets listed precisely. His protections absolute. Third, a dissolution framework. A clean, documented separation structure, ready to execute when he said the word. Patricia was quiet for a moment. He could hear her writing. "Give me 48 hours, she said. "Take 72. I need it right." "It will be right," she said. "It always is." He hung up and moved to the second item on the list. His financial advisor, Marcus, had known him for 6 years. Darius had never called him before 8 in the morning. He called him at 7:40. He kept it simple. He explained what he needed. Not why, just what. The brokerage account restructured. Beneficiary designations reviewed and updated. Both accounts moved into configurations that were fully his, fully documented, and completely impervious to the language in the clause on page 9 of Priya's submitted paperwork. Nothing hidden. Nothing illegal. Just clean and closed and his. Marcus asked 2 questions, got 2 answers, said he could have it done by end of day. "Thank you," Darius said. "You good?" Marcus asked. "Getting there," Darius said, and ended the call. He texted Floyd at 8. "Need your phone for 10 minutes. Bring it to the office." Floyd was at his desk when Darius arrived. He handed the phone over without a word, without a question, the same way he'd handed over Walt's number 3 weeks ago. That was Floyd. Never needed a full explanation when half of one would do. Darius walked to the small conference room at the end of the hall. Empty at this hour. He closed the door. He dialed Becca's number from memory. He'd looked it up 2 days ago and let it sit there, waiting. She answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was casual, a little distracted. "Hello?" "Becca," he said. "This is Darius." Silence. Not the silence of confusion. The silence of a person who has just had their footing taken out from under them. He didn't rush it. He let it sit for a second. "I know about the loan," he said. "I know what the condition was. I want you to know that." He hung up. He stood in the conference room for a moment. Outside the glass, the office was starting to fill. Keyboards, voices, the low hum of a normal day beginning. He looked at Floyd's phone in his hand. The call had lasted 18 seconds. He walked back out and set the phone on Floyd's desk. Floyd looked up at him. Darius nodded once. Floyd turned back to his monitor. The 4th call was the easiest one to make, and the hardest one to think about. Priya's mother, Nalini, answered on the 2nd ring. Her voice was warm the way it always was, unhurried, a little lilting, the kind of warmth that had nothing to do with strategy. She had always been genuine with him. He had always liked her for it. "Darius, Beta, good morning." "Good morning, Auntie." He settled into the name naturally. She had asked him to use it 6 months ago. "I've been thinking about something. Before the wedding, I'd love for both families to sit down together. Something formal. Dinner. Everyone present. I want to do this right. Honor it properly." He could hear the smile in her voice before she said a word. "Oh, Darius, that's... yes. Absolutely yes. Priya's father will love that. When were you thinking?" They landed on a Saturday 2.5 weeks out. She said she would handle her side. He said he would handle his. "You are a good man," Nalini said. "She is lucky." "I'll see you soon, Auntie," he said. He sat in his car in the parking deck for a moment after he hung up. He did not move. He just sat with it. What that call meant. What it was setting in motion. What it was going to cost a woman who had done nothing wrong and would find out something terrible in front of the people she loved most. Then he picked up his bag and went to work. That evening he drove to Aunt Constance's house. Her kitchen smelled like it always did. Something cooked down slow, a little sweet, deeply familiar. She set a plate in front of him without asking and sat across from him and folded her hands. He laid out the full plan. All 4 moves. The dinner. Patricia's documents. What comes next? He went through it in order, the same way he'd gone through it for Patricia, the same way he went through everything, clean, sequenced, nothing wasted. Constance did not interrupt him once. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. She looked at her folded hands, then at him. "You're your mother's child," she said. Her voice was steady, but something moved underneath it. She never got loud either. But Lord, when she moved, she stopped. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The table looked the way his mother used to say a table should look when it mattered. White linen. Real glasses. Not the ones in the back of the cabinet. The good plates. The ones Aunt Constance had brought over 2 weeks ago in a box she carried herself, setting them down on his counter without explanation, the way she did most things that mattered. Candles, low and steady. A centerpiece of dark greenery that Terry had put together that afternoon, while Floyd stood in the kitchen pretending to help, and actually just eating the olives. Darius had cooked, not catered. Cooked. Braised short ribs, roasted vegetables, good bread from the bakery on Peachtree, a bottle of scotch for Priya's father, Vijay, Balvenie 14, which Vijay had mentioned once at a birthday dinner 4 months ago, offhand, the kind of detail most people let fall right through them. Darius had written it down that same night. They arrived in 2 groups, 7 minutes apart. His side first, Constance in a deep plum dress that made her look like someone who had already won. Terry beside her, quieter than usual, eyes moving around the room with the careful attention of someone managing something heavy behind her expression. Floyd last, in a blazer he had clearly ironed himself, his big laugh already filling the entryway before the door had finished opening. Priya's family came next. Nalini first, pulling Darius into a hug and pressing both his hands between hers. Vijay behind her, measured, formal, a man who showed respect through attention. He shook Darius's hand with both of his and looked him in the eye and said, "Good house," with the quiet approval of someone who didn't hand out compliments loosely. Becca came in last, behind Priya. She wore something expensive and simple, her face arranged into a version of warmth that Darius now recognized the way you recognize a particular kind of joint that's been incorrectly welded. The seam is there if you know where to look. Priya was beautiful. She had worn the earrings he bought her for Christmas. She kissed him at the door and told him the table was perfect, and looked at him with something that might have been love, or might have been relief, or might have been both at once. He was no longer certain those were different things with her. He said, "Come in. Everyone come in." 40 minutes. That was how long he let it breathe. He moved through the room with a plate of appetizers and the ease of a man who had nowhere else to be. He topped Vijay's glass and asked about the drive up from Buckhead. He asked Nalini about the birthday dinner she had mentioned planning, 3 weeks out, she'd said on the phone, and watched her face light up that he'd remembered. He and Floyd managed to get into a loud, briefly ridiculous disagreement about whether a particular Falcons game had been called correctly, which made Vijay laugh in spite of himself and broke the formality of the room down to something comfortable. Terry sat beside Constance. Constance sat straight. Neither of them laughed as much as usual, but no one noticed. Floyd was loud enough to cover both of them. Becca stayed close to Priya. She drank her wine slowly, which Darius noted because Becca did not usually drink slowly. They moved to the table. Darius served. He kept the conversation easy. Family stories, light history, the wedding venue, plans. Priya held his hand once across the corner of the table, and he let her. At the 40-minute mark, he stood. He picked up his glass. He looked around the table, both sides of it, all of them, and he let the room settle into the kind of quiet that follows naturally when someone stands and the expectation of a toast forms in the air. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he said. His voice was calm, easy. "Both families at one table matters to me. I don't take it lightly." Nalini smiled. Vijay nodded. Priya looked up at him with something warm and open in her face. "I want to talk about what a marriage is built on," he said. "What the foundation actually is. Because I'm a structural engineer, and I've spent a long time understanding what holds things up and what brings them down." He set his glass down. He reached under his chair. He placed a manila folder on the table in front of him. Then he placed one in front of Floyd, and Floyd, without expression, without theater, stood and set copies at each place along the table. Priya went very still. "I want to talk about honesty," Darius said, "because before we go any further, before we go one single day further, there are things that need to be said out loud, in front of the people who love us." He opened his folder. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't tremble. He laid it down the way he would lay down calculations on a project that was already decided. Clear, sequenced, and exactly right. The terrace, the courtyard, the half-open glass door, and exactly what he had heard, and exactly what Priya had said, in her own voice, to the woman sitting 3 seats to her left. Nalini's hand moved to the table's edge. He continued, Walt Briggs, public records. The deed pulled 3 months before the proposal. The paid-off mortgage documentation. The assessed value history, requested through a real estate attorney contact, at a time when Priya had no professional reason to need any of it. Vijay looked down at the papers in front of him. He began to read. He continued. Patricia Ose's annotated summary, 2 pages, clean and precise, of the spousal rights provision buried in the supplemental paperwork Priya's attorney had submitted. The clause highlighted. Patricia's note in the margin, 3 words in her careful hand. Acquisition, not protection. Priya said, You don't know what you're talking about. Her voice was controlled. Almost. From the far end of the table, Becca pushed her chair back. She set her napkin down. She moved her eyes toward the hallway. Floyd was already at the door. He hadn't said a word. He was just there, his big frame easy in the doorway, his hands loose at his sides, his expression perfectly still. Sit down, Becca, Darius said. It was not a request. Becca sat down. Nalini put her hand over her mouth. Vijay set the papers down slowly. He looked at Priya. He looked at her the way a man looks at someone he does not recognize, not with anger, not yet, but with the particular stillness of a person trying to locate something familiar in a face that is suddenly new. Priya said, louder this time, Darius, these are documents you don't understand. You're reading them out of context, and your attorney submitted a deed amendment clause specifically designed to survive marital dissolution, he said. Patricia Ose explains it on page 2. The language is on page 2. I'm not reading it out of context. I'm reading it exactly as it was written. Vijay picked the pages back up. He turned to page 2. The room held its breath. Darius looked at Priya. I know about the $18,000 loan from Becca, he said. I know the condition attached to it. I know about Gordon Ashby. I know about the account restructuring you planned for 6 months after the wedding. I know all of it, Priya. A beat. I've known for weeks. The silence that followed was absolute. The candles burned low and steady. Nobody moved. Priya's warmth left her face the way heat leaves a room when a window opens in winter. Fast. Completely. What replaced it was not anger. It was something harder than that. Something practiced. You're being paranoid, she said. Her voice was level, smooth. You found some paperwork you don't understand? You let your aunt and your friend fill your head with... The clause is on page 2, Darius said. Theories. And now you're humiliating me in front of my parents. Her chin lifted slightly. In my own house. My house, he said. He said it without heat. Just a fact. A load-bearing fact. I am standing in front of people I love, Priya continued, her voice gathering something that sounded almost like indignation. Being accused of what, exactly? Being smart about finances? Understanding what I was marrying into? That's not a crime, Darius. That's not... Your attorney submitted a spousal rights provision designed to survive marital dissolution, he said. That is on page 2. The language is highlighted. Patricia's note is in the margin. He did not look away from her. I'm not accusing you of being smart about finances. I'm showing everyone in this room what you did with that smartness. Vijay set his glass down. He had not spoken since he'd read the first page. Now he looked at Priya across the table, not with fury, but with the fixed, careful expression of a man doing something precise with his face, so that the thing underneath it does not come out wrong. Let me see the second page, he said. Daddy? Priya. Just her name. Quiet as a closed door. She stopped. He picked up page 2. He read it. He turned the page over as if checking for something on the back, and then he turned it right side up again and read it a second time. His eyes moved slowly across Patricia's 3-word margin note. Acquisition, not protection. He set the page down on the table in front of him, flush with the edge, perfectly straight. The way a man sets something down when he needs his hands to be empty. He looked at his daughter. "What happened to you?" His voice was barely above a whisper. That was the thing that made it land the way it did. Not volume, not sharpness, just those 4 words, and the sound of a father who genuinely did not know the answer. Nalini made a sound beside him that was not quite a word. Priya's jaw tightened. She looked away from her father and then back, her eyes tracking across the room for somewhere to land. Becca cleared her throat. "I think," she said, with a small, careful laugh, "everyone is making this bigger than it needs to be. Priya is a smart woman who was protecting herself financially. Honestly, that's business savvy. That's what any smart person does when there's significant—" "Becca." One word, from Constance, from the far end of the table, where she had sat perfectly still for the last 20 minutes, with her hands folded and her spine straight, and her eyes seeing everything. Becca stopped talking. Constance looked at her directly, not with cruelty, with something more settled than cruelty. "You lent that girl money to help her trap a man who worked 16-hour days and grew up with nothing. A beat. Don't call that savvy." Becca looked down at her plate. She did not speak again. The candles had burned lower. The room was very quiet. Then Priya's breath caught, a small sound, almost involuntary, and when Darius looked at her, her eyes were wet. Real tears. He had seen them before. They were always real. That had never been the thing in question. "I was scared," she said. Her voice broke around the edges, just enough. "You don't know what it's been like. The debt, I've been carrying it for years, and I didn't know how to tell you, and I panicked, and I made choices that I knew were wrong, but I was so tired of being afraid of money, Darius. I was so tired." She pressed her fingers to the corner of her eye. "I love you. I do. Whatever you think about all of this, I need you to know that." The room waited. Darius was quiet for a moment, not hesitating, thinking. "I believe you were scared," he said finally. "The debt is real. That fear was real. I believe that." She looked up at him. "I also believe you knew exactly what you were doing." His voice did not waver. "Both things can be true." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He set the ring box on the table. The velvet was dark against the white tablecloth. He did not push it toward her. He simply placed it there, between them, where everything that had been between them now was. "The engagement is over." No one moved. No one spoke. Under the table, Terry found his hand. She didn't say anything. She just held on. He let her. It was the only moment all night that cost him something he couldn't completely keep inside. The consequences did not arrive like a storm. They arrived the way cold does, quietly, settling into everything. Darius did not call anyone. He did not make any moves. He simply went back to work on a Monday morning and let the world do what the world does when the truth is finally in the room. Priya's firm had 2 board members who knew Darius professionally. He had worked with one of them on a commercial project 3 years back. The other had been at a conference where Darius presented load analysis on a mixed-use development in Buckhead. Neither man was his close friend. Neither man needed to be. Stories move. That is simply what they do. He never learned exactly how it traveled. He didn't need to. What he knew was this. Within 3 weeks of the dinner, Priya was no longer leading the Harmon account. Within 5 weeks, she was not in the building at all, not fired in a loud, dramatic way, just quietly moved to the outside of things, the way you move a piece of furniture that no longer fits the room. In her field, trust was the whole job. Once it was gone, the job followed it out the door. He felt nothing in particular about that. He had not arranged it. It had arranged itself. Becca's $18,000 was simply gone. Walt's contact confirmed what Patricia had already suspected. The moment the loan's conditional nature was documented and entered into the legal record, the agreement became unenforceable. There was no mechanism by which Becca could recover it without exposing the condition itself, which exposed the plan, which exposed her. She did not try. She was smarter than that. The $18,000 was the cost of what she had done. She paid it in silence, which was the only currency left to her. Priya's parents were a different matter entirely. They did not make any public statements. They did not call Darius, and he did not call them. Nalini sent a brief, careful text 2 days after the dinner. Just, "I am so sorry, Darius." And he replied warmly because she had nothing to be sorry for, and he wanted her to know he understood that. Vijay did not speak to his daughter for 6 weeks. That was the thing Priya had not calculated for. She had run every scenario in her head. Darius was certain of that. She was too precise not to. She had calculated losing Darius. She had calculated legal exposure. She had probably even calculated the job. But she had not calculated her father setting her document down flush with the edge of the table and asking, in a voice barely above a whisper, "What happened to you?" and then going silent for 42 days. That was the gap in her math. Some costs you cannot see until they are already paid. 14 months later, Darius was in Memphis, Aunt Constance's backyard on a Saturday afternoon in late September. The light was going golden the way it does that time of year, low and warm and unhurried, falling through the oak trees she had planted 15 years ago and never stopped believing would get tall. They were tall now. The yard was full. Neighbors he'd known since childhood. Cousins he only saw at events like this. Terry was there with Marcus, her husband of 8 months, the two of them standing near the back fence in the easy, unhurried way of people who are simply glad to be somewhere together. Floyd was at the grill. Of course Floyd was at the grill. He was holding a spatula and gesturing confidently at something that was producing a concerning amount of smoke. And when Terry pointed at it, he said, loudly and without any doubt whatsoever, "It's fine." This is called searing. It was not fine. It was clearly not fine. Darius watched Constance's neighbor quietly move her paper plate to the other side of the picnic table and smiled into his cup. He was sitting in a lawn chair near the edge of the patio, plate balanced on his knee, half listening to the yard and half inside his own head, the way he sometimes got at gatherings. Not unhappy, just still. The promotion had come through 11 weeks ago. Senior Project Lead. A title he had been building toward for 3 years in increments so small that most people around him had not tracked the progress. He had not told Priya about it because it was not finalized, and he had learned early in life not to announce what was not yet real. He had also not told her because something in him, even before the party, had kept certain things quietly his own. The Nashville partnership was newer. A black-owned development firm with a project in East Memphis that needed a structural engineer who understood the neighborhood. He had said yes before they finished the sentence. It was the most excited he had been about work in years, maybe ever. He was building something real, something his, something that had nothing to do with anyone who had tried to take from him. It felt exactly like it was supposed to feel. Across the yard, Aunt Constance caught his eye. She raised her glass of sweet tea, slow and deliberate, the way she did everything. He raised his. She never got loud, but Lord, when she moved, he smiled. "Yeah, I know where I get it. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.